On an urban street, a pedestrian walks beside a flatbed truck carrying stacked precast concrete blocks. As he walks past, an unsecured slab begins to shift. Never walk, stand, or linger directly beside the unsecured cargo of a loaded flatbed truck. On a rural farm driveway, a worker begins closing a heavy metal gate while a flatbed truck hauling large equipment is still passing through the exit. The truck's rear clearance contacts the gate frame. Never approach or close a gate while a truck, trailer, or oversized load is passing through. Wide equipment and momentum can snag the gate as clearance tightens, causing it to swing suddenly and create a serious contact risk for anyone nearby. To prevent this, keep a strict exclusion zone and stay clear until the entire vehicle, including the rear of the trailer, has fully exited the gateway. In a construction environment, an operator carefully backs a cat skid steer down steep, narrow ramps. As the machine tips onto the incline, its balance begins to change. This situation illustrates a failure to follow the heavy end uphill rule. Skid steers have a short wheelbase, and when the bucket is empty, the engine places more weight toward the rear of the machine. By backing down the ramp, the operator positioned the heaviest portion of the machine on the downhill side, allowing the center of balance to move beyond a stable range. To prevent this, always keep the heaviest end of the machine facing uphill. When the bucket is empty, drive forward down the ramp, only back down a ramp when carrying a heavy load in the bucket. In addition, never use narrow or portable ramps for heavy equipment. Two workers carry a massive pane of glass directly across a road, but before they can clear the lane, a fast-moving motorcycle makes contact with the glass. Never carry large, unflagged sheets of glass across an active roadway without proper traffic control. Transparent panes can reflect the surroundings, making the barrier difficult for approaching drivers to see. To prevent this, transport crews must meticulously mark all clear materials with high visibility painter's tape or flags before they ever leave the staging area. Furthermore, anytime material movement intersects with a live vehicle lane, you must deploy dedicated ground spotters to actively halt traffic before the load crosses the threshold. Inside a beverage warehouse, an operator backs a stand-up reach forklift toward a doorway with the mast fully elevated, creating a clear overhead clearance hazard. Never move or maneuver a forklift with the mast raised above the minimum travel height. A fully elevated mast raises the center of gravity, and if it contacts an overhead beam while moving, can quickly destabilize the truck and reduce control. To prevent this, operators must rigorously lower their forks to just a few inches off the floor before ever putting the transmission into gear. Furthermore, you must continuously scan your entire travel path for overhead obstructions, such as doorways, structural beams, and HVAC equipment. On this demolition site, two workers try to push down a heavy, unsupported mud and wood wall by hand. But as force is applied, the entire structure fails in an unintended direction. Never stand within the potential collapse radius of an unsupported freestanding wall during manual demolition. Once a structural wall is compromised and separated from its framing, its center of gravity becomes entirely unstable. The moment you apply manual force, the heavy mass of earth and timber can pivot and fall in any direction. To prevent this, workers should utilize long-reach mechanical equipment or engineered cabling systems to safely pull walls down from a distance, rather than relying on human strength. Inside an open warehouse, a worker stands on a ladder to remove an insect hive while a second worker steadies the base. As the nest is dislodged with a long pole, chaos ensues. Never stand directly beneath a worker dislodging an overhead insect hive. If the nest falls into the drop zone, the spotter may instinctively move away, instantly leaving the ladder without support. To prevent this, use professional pest control with proper protective equipment. Ground personnel must set a strict exclusion zone, and the ladder should be secured to a solid structure rather than relying on a person to hold it. Inside a busy warehouse shipping bay, a worker leans into an open trailer to check stacked boxes. Before dock clearance is confirmed, the truck pulls away. Never stand on the unprotected edge of a loading dock or lean into a trailer unless the truck is mechanically secured. If a driver cannot see the trailer threshold and moves on assumption instead of direct communication, the trailer can pull away from the dock and remove the surface that a worker is depending on. To prevent this, shipping facilities should use automatic dock restraints or heavy-duty wheel chocks to keep trucks from moving. On a steep hillside path, a rider guides a loaded three-wheeled utility motorcycle around a tight downhill turn, but the heavy vehicle completely loses traction. Never carry excess speed or make sharp steering inputs when operating a loaded cargo tricycle on a steep, narrow downgrade. Three-wheeled vehicles are less stable by design, and a heavy rear load on a downhill slope can reduce traction and make steering harder to control. In that condition, even a single sharp turn can quickly push the vehicle toward the edge of the path. To prevent this, operators must slow to a crawl before entering any downhill curve and use low gears rather than relying solely on the front brake. Inside a manufacturing plant, an overhead crane lifts a large industrial engine while a worker remains below, creating an immediate suspended load hazard. Never stand beneath, reach under, or position your body within the path of a heavy suspended load. Lifting slings, chains, and hoists operate under extreme tension, and if a rigging point or mechanical connection fails, the load can drop without warning and damage anything below. To prevent this, rigging crews must establish and enforce a strict exclusion zone before any lift begins, keeping all ground personnel clear of the area. If a load needs to be guided or positioned during a hoist, workers should use long tag lines from a safe distance. When components fail during lifting, there is often no time to react safely. Two workers stand in the load path as an overhead crane hoists a massive steel cylinder from a flatbed truck. A rigging instability creates an immediate suspended load hazard. Never hoist a smooth cylindrical load with a standard basket hitch using bare metal chains, and never stand within the possible movement range of a live crane lift. Smooth steel provides very little grip against metal chains, so if the load shifts or the crane angle changes, the rigging can slip off and the load can move unpredictably. To prevent this, riggers should use synthetic web slings in a double-wrap choker hitch so the sling tightens around the load as tension is applied. Ground crews must also establish a strict exclusion zone before the lift begins. In a cotton storage depot, a worker struggles to open a tightly bound bale and attempts to cut the binding using an open flame source. Once heat is introduced to the exposed fibers, conditions become critical immediately. Never ever introduce any ignition or heat-producing source into a fiber storage zone. This represents a high flammability hazard. Loose cotton fibers have an extremely high surface area to mass ratio and remain fully oxygenated at all times. Instead of reacting gradually, these fibers can ignite and spread extremely fast. A single heat contact point can trigger rapid surface involvement that spreads faster than a person can reasonably react, making immediate control very difficult once it begins. To prevent this, facilities must enforce a strict no-ignition sources policy by screening and restricting items such as lighters and matches before personnel enter the storage area. All workers should be equipped with approved safety shears or hook-style cutting tools specifically designed for cutting bale bindings. Always remember, within a combustible fiber environment, an ignition source is not a convenience tool. It is a serious and unacceptable hazard.